Who's ready to celebrate? I'm Kimberly Barber with Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program, and I'm so happy to be your host for our virtual Shellabration experience. Before we get underway, I'd like to say first and foremost that we appreciate your support and thank you for being here with us. Proceeds from this event directly support our SPAT program and Back to the Bays initiative and will enable us to continue to present community aquaculture opportunities to the public and engage our communities in the various marine stewardship projects we conduct annually. This year has been tough on a number of levels for everyone, and as a nonprofit organization, we're facing some challenges these days, so it means a lot that you have chosen to contribute in support of our work. Thank you so much. Traditionally, when the first weekend in December rolls around, it means it's time to welcome over 1,000 Shellabrins here to Greenport Village to enjoy Shellabration, a culinary exploration featuring the best local shellfish, sustainable seafood, local wine, and craft beer the East End has to offer. Unfortunately, this year it was just not possible to present this event in person, but we wanted to keep the spirit of Shellabration alive, so a shift was made to offer this virtual event. While nothing beats going to all the amazing restaurants in Greenport, we will do our best to bring Shellabration to you. We'll be featuring some of the talented chefs who typically prepare inventive pairing menus for your enjoyment, and we'll also take the opportunity to showcase the important efforts that proceeds from this event support. Along the way, we'll meet some local shellfish farmers and check in with members of our CCE Marine team to learn more about some of the work that we have going on. As part of this virtual event, we're also incorporating a fun challenge for you to take part in, Shellabingo. Learn about the game and prizes you can win on virtualshellabration.org and look for our Shellabingo clues in the right corner of your screen throughout our virtual presentation. Now, first things first, I think we need to open some oysters, pour a drink, and have a toast to virtual Shellabration. So to kick things off, we're going to get an oyster shucking demonstration from our Marine Program Director, Chris Pickerel. Many of you may have never shucked your own shellfish, but don't panic, we're here to help. I hope you've procured some oysters from our featured growers and have your shucking implements ready. Now, Chris, take it away.
Thanks, Kim, and welcome to this year's Shellabration. We're sorry that it's not the normal celebration, but this year we're doing something a little bit different, so we're kind of excited about it. It's our first attempt at a virtual event, but we're hoping you enjoy it. What I'm going to be doing today, at least initially, is showing you how to open an oyster, because oysters are clearly the star of the show, so we want to do that. So these oysters were grown at our Cornell facility in Southold, so they're beautiful looking animals. See right here. But what I want to do before we start is give them a little bit of a rinse. So come on over to the sink, let's check it out. So these guys literally just came out of the water this morning, less than an hour ago. So they're wonderful. If you have an opportunity to pick your own oysters, you want to look for ones that are nice and clean. Ideally, they have this kind of growth edge on them out here. And also, importantly, relative to opening them, you want to look for the hinge end. You want to avoid oysters that have kind of this curl to that end, so that makes it hard to open.
What would you do with the ones with the curls, Chris?
They can be steamed open. They can be open, but they're not good on the half shell. So what's going to happen is the shell might break. So depending on how brittle that is, that's going to happen. So we'll see how these do. I think these are going to be fine, but we'll find out pretty soon. You can use a brush, you can use any kind of abrasive to do that, depending on what you're doing. I mean, you got to think about the fact that people are going to, if these are eaten on the half shell, they're going to be putting them up to the mouth, so you want to have them on the clean side, basically. So anyway, these look pretty good. I rinsed them off already. So we're going to bring them over here. I got a towel here. So tools of the trade. So one of the things you want to think about is an oyster knife. So there are many options for that. And I've got kind of my preference, but I'll show you some different versions of that. So these are standard ones you can get at a hardware store or at a fish store, Dexter brand, Russell's. These are great. I like these a lot. These are two different versions of the oyster knife. One is flat, which kind of I prefer. And this one I modified. If you could tell kind of by the facets, I filed it down to make it thinner to sneak it into the back of the oyster. This is another one which has a little bit of an angle hook on the end, so you get that leverage, and I'll show you why that's important. This is another type here. A little bit thicker. I tried to thin it down. This is not my favorite. This was a gift, but I'm not crazy about this one. And this one here is one given to me by my friends at South Bay Oysters. So this is one, initially this scared me because of the sharp point, but actually these work really, really well. So that's interesting to try the different types. I'll show you them. And then kind of just to take a step back, and historically what oyster knives look like. These are some in my collection that I don't use for opening oysters, but these are some of the older types. So this is literally almost looks like some type of chisel or what have you, or some industrial tool. They're really heavy and they work really well, believe it or not, but they do rust. And these are so kind of mid to later 19th century versions. And they all have a flat side and then a curved or beveled side. Same thing here, same thing here. And I'm not going to use these, but because these are too old, but these are what would have been used in the 1800s. The other thing you want to think about with opening oysters, you can do it with your bare hands, but I prefer using a glove. So this is a type of glove you can use. This happens to be a cold weather glove, which you don't need, but a glove that has that rubber side to it is kind of nice. It's grippy. And then if you want to get really fancy, they've got these chainmail versions, which are not cheap by any means, but this is something that you can think about. And there's really no way you can hurt yourself with this, so it's kind of great. So anyway, we'll hold that for now, and we'll just talk about the shucking. So, but one thing I wanted to do was kind of give a shout out to the SPAT members. So if you've been to Shellabration before, you know that it partially benefits the SPAT program, which is the Suffolk Project in Aquaculture Training. But you also would have seen all the volunteers, which would be wearing these red things here. And I just got this one today. Still got a tag on it, so I'm going to put this on and look official. It's Cornell red. It's got the SPAT logo on it. Thank you, Kim Techo, for that. And I'm going to wear this so I can put my knife in there if I wanted to look fancy. Anyway, it's good to have that. So normally, if you came to our Shellabration event, you'd see the volunteers wearing these. I'd be kind of milling around, helping a little bit, maybe delivering oysters, what have you. But these are the folks that are doing the work. So shout out to those guys and gals for all the years they've been putting in, helping out, and it does benefit their program. So getting back to the opening, I'm going to use my favorite knife right here. This guy, and I'm going to pick an oyster. So these all look really good. These came from the lab. I'm going to pick this one. It's got a nice cup to it. We're going to put it cup side down in a towel. You can wear a glove, but I prefer not to for this demonstration. So what I'm going to do is insert the knife, the oyster knife, into this hinge section and push in this way. Once you get a little bit of a release, then you're going to be twisting it to break that hinge. So I'm going to push it in a little bit. This guy's fighting me pretty good. Oh, there we go. See that little break? So once you get that, then you could slide the knife in, and the adductor muscle is over here on this side. So I'm going to come in and come across that. So I'm in here, and then I'm coming straight over and crossing over this way. It's not this side. So let's do it this way. I'll slide down the inside of the shell, try to keep stuff in place. See what it looks like. There you go. So that's what it looks like. So obviously the muscle goes from top to bottom to hold the shell together. So what we're going to do is then pass the knife under the muscle to release it that way. And just do a little sweep like that. And there you go. Not perfect, but that's kind of how it works. So let's try a different knife here. This is one. This is another version. As I said, I got this from my friends at South Bay Oyster, Ben and Dave, and I'm going to try this guy here. Looks good. Now this knife looks kind of scary. It does, but it's got this guard, which is nice. But the advantage of a knife like this, which I didn't really realize until they gave this to me, is that you have all this leverage. That's this focal point right here. So this is what I typically use, and it's a little wider, but this is almost better in a way. So let's see how this one works. So again, the same method, putting the cup side down. We're going to put the towel on top. I'm going to point at that apex of the shell here where the hinge is. Going to go in, little release, little twist. There you go. And then we'll do the same thing. So we'll come over, this way. So here we go. And I'll come back because I feel a little bit left on there. So here we go. Oh, a little bit left on top. It's a little sloppy. I'm not a professional, so to speak, but this is nice. You see the mantle's intact, the belly of the oyster's intact. And again, we're going to pass through and clear that mussel, and then I like to just kind of do this to make sure we're good to go. The French serve the oysters with the animal still attached to the bottom of the shell, which indicates that it's fresh, but in this country we typically would shuck it entirely so it would slide into your mouth pretty easily. So I'll demonstrate that part, which is my favorite part of all. So amazing, amazing. Just came out of the bay today. Just tastes amazing. So I'll do another one. I'm not going to use the old knives. What I'll do is I'll do it with a glove this time. And this is a kind of a fancy chainmail glove that we have here. Make sure I get it on straight. This way. This was a gift from Kim Techo, so thank you, Kim. I think I earned it, though. Okay.
Chris, how many typical? How fast do you have to be when you're a shucker?
Ooh, you have to be really fast. I was doing some opening at vineyards for a while, and I wasn't fast enough. But it's like, you know, the guys and gals that can get real fast, it's like within seconds, basically. Right. But it takes a while to kind of get warmed up and get good at it. But you know, if you're doing it in your home for a meal, it's a process. You kind of like it, and you want to appreciate the animal and look at it and before you open it, and kind of take your time with it. So that's what we're doing here. So. In this case, I've got the glove. I don't need the towel. I mean, it's still good to have something because otherwise these guys rock all over the place. So it's good to have the towel here, but I can hold it this way. You can do it even in your hand like this, but again, I don't even like that. So we're gonna go in the hinge again. You're gonna put the knife in like this into that hinge, kind of at a 45-degree angle from horizontal. Hold the oyster, push in. Once you get a little release, twist. So again, you see that gap forming, and then you're going in and swiping to the right. So in and then this way. There you go. And I'm going to do this. Again, not perfect because I haven't opened these in quite a while, but the big thing is you don't want to damage that belly if you can help it. And then we'll come in and we'll cut under that adductor muscle there, and we are good to go. There's a little bit of stuff in there, a little bit of shell fragments. I want to avoid that. I want to thank you all for spending time in my kitchen. Thank you for sitting through my demo and watching me open oysters. I hope you're doing the same at home and you're using your knife and your towel and your cutting board and you're buying from local purveyors. But again, thank you for attending Shellabration this year, and we look forward to seeing you next year in person. Amazing.
Thanks, Chris, for sharing all of your knowledge of shucking oysters with us. If raw shellfish isn't your thing, that's okay. We have you covered. For our first cooking demo segment, we're featuring Chef Jason Casey from First and South Restaurant, who put together a delicious roasted oyster pairing featuring McCall Rosé for us to try.
So today we're going to be wood roasting some local oysters, part of the Cornell Oyster Project. We're going to finish them with a rosé version of beurre blanc, so a beurre rosé, in the wood burning oven behind me.
So what's the process here? What do you got to start off with?
So first we're going to do is make our reduction sauce for the rosé beurre blanc sauce, which consists of using McCall Rosé. We're going to be adding in a little bit of lemon juice for acidity, whole black peppercorns, and a bay leaf, and we will reduce that down first. So over a medium-high heat, we are going to add about a cup of McCall Rosé right into the pan. There we are. Next, we're gonna add in about 6 to 8 black peppercorns and 1 whole bay leaf. Next, we wanna add a little bit of acidity. We're gonna add in a little bit of lemon juice from 1/2 of a lemon. And the last thing we add to our reduction sauce is going to be a little bit of shallot. So while the reduction is working, we're gonna start opening a few of our local oysters. I picked up these last night, made sure they were scrubbed and nice and clean. So we're gonna put our oyster knife right into the back of the hinge, pop it up, and run the knife across the top of the inside shell to release it from the actual oyster.
And what are you cutting in there?
I am cutting the muscle that opens and closes the oyster shell. We want to make sure not to have any shell inside our oyster. And we also want to loosen the muscle from at the bottom so when we go to eat it, it doesn't stick. There we are.
Man, your reduction is starting to smell beautiful. Oh, it's really good.
So it looks like our reduction has reduced down to about 1/4 of the amount of liquid that is inside the pan. I am going to lower the heat to a simmer. And now I'm going to start mounting in our butter for the beurre blanc sauce. Basically, we want to add enough butter where it does not separate, but it also does not cool down the mixture too quickly. So we'll start with 2 tablespoons and constantly stir to incorporate the butter into our reduction sauce. Once I see 1 or 2 cubes melted, I will add another 1 or 2 cubes so the sauce does not separate.
And how much of the butter do you add in there?
We're gonna be adding in about 1/4 of a pound of butter into the initial 1 cup of rosé. What I'm looking for is a certain viscosity, essentially a melted butter texture. It's going to be a little bit loose because of the wine reduction, but I also don't want it to be as thin as water. And it's looking really wonderful right now. Give it a quick taste. We have the right amount of acidity. I'm going to add just a pinch of salt. And 2 more pieces of butter. Don't cook it too fast. You want to have the right viscosity and the right sauce. So now that I see the last 2 pieces are just barely visible, I stop stirring and I am going to strain the sauce into a container that I have ready to go. Just like so. So our next step, we are going to season the oysters and get them ready to be put into the wood burning oven. First, we're gonna add a little bit of shallot, so I'm gonna chop a little bit. Now that I have that set, we will begin to set up our oysters for roasting. So we're gonna add a little bit of our shallot on top. This is going to add a little bit of texture and flavor to the oyster. Next, we're going to crack some whole black pepper, again for both texture and flavor. And now we're going to top the oysters with some of the beurre blanc as it cooks. So now we're going to bring our oysters over to our wood burning oven. At home, you can do this right in the broiler on high with your rack at the highest point. The oysters will cook for approximately 2 to 2.5 minutes. It's been about 2 minutes. We're going to pull the oysters out. You can see how wonderful they are, bubbling in the center. You can see the caramelization happening on the top with the shallots. I'd say these are done.
Nice.
And now we're going to plate our oysters. One tip that I like to do at home is to add a little bit of kosher salt right in the middle of my plate. And that will ensure the oysters stand nice and flat so we don't lose any of that juice. And for one last little garnish, we will add a little bit of lemon zest.
So Jason, tell us why you chose the McCall. It's a rosé, right?
It is their rosé, and I find it to be absolutely wonderful as a great rosé. I enjoy it for this particular application because when reduced, it has this wonderful pink hue as you see at the end product, where with other rosés that I've tried, it's a little too light and doesn't really stand out as a Burr rosé.
Well, we've loved to participate in Shellabration with the restaurants, so we actually supply the wines that end up pairing with a lot of the meals prepared. So that's a very simple way that we can be involved. And then in terms of Cornell, you know, Cornell also has a vineyard program, and you know, they're constantly, you know, evolving and helping us as a vineyard community understand grape growing out here on Long Island. So that's definitely a very important part of what we, you know, our relationship is really intertwined with Cornell as well regarding the vineyards and sustainability and best practices in the vineyard.
At First and South, we value local and sustainable seafood because we know that as a community, which our restaurant really focuses on that we can help our neighbor who is our local purveyor, whether it be oysters, whether it be seafood, and that community aspect is a huge part of not only the restaurant business, but just community in general.
What's your favorite part of Shellabration?
The seafood, of course. Experiencing all these different innovative dishes from all of the different restaurants that are participating is really exciting. You know, we get to see something like this from Jason at First and South, which is, you know, really special. And then this time around, to get to experience it at home as well and be able to cook this and feel confident about supporting the community by buying local shellfish and seafood is really exciting. But definitely experiencing all the different types of seafood there is to offer out here on the North Fork.
So through First and South Restaurant in Greenport, they have composed a dish every year that Shellabration has, you know, brought this to the table in town, and will continue to do so. Thus far, we try to, you know, educate through our dishes at the restaurant what we can offer with different shellfish, and I think today shows what kind of a great dish can become of that.
I can't wait to try that recipe. Thanks Chef Jason, Sarah, and everyone at First and South for supporting Shellabration and bringing us such great pairings with McCall wines to enjoy each year. Now let's switch gears for a few minutes and learn a bit more about what Shellabration supports. We're going to head to our flagship facility in Southold and check in with Kim Tetro, the director of our SPAT program.
Well, the SPAT program to me, I've been at Cornell for 25 years now. The entire time I've been at Cornell, I've understood our mandate, which is to teach people things that put them to work that improve our world. And SPAT is that incarnate. So now, none of them are commercial, even though SPAT has really started out about 15 oyster companies to date in the 25 years. The importance of the SPAT program is that it teaches people to be good stewards of the environment as a whole. And because we're on the area we are in, it's very marine-based. So we're a clearinghouse of information. We're here year-round. We offer year-round opportunities for people to be involved. And because of that, I've had members, SPAT is going into its 21st year, and I have members that have been with me for 20 years of that, consistently, which is phenomenal. Why would anyone have that kind of tenaciousness? Because every time somebody comes here, they can learn something new, and they can do actual hands-on work that does benefit the community. You know, because we are a community-based program that is reliant on participation and what I call momentum, in other words, you can't just turn the switch off and say, oh, well, we're shut down and nobody's going to do anything this year. That would lose a huge amount of momentum. So right when COVID hit and the lockdown started, I drafted a proposal on how we would safely go about the SPAT program. With COVID, it had to be by appointment only so that we could limit the amount of exposure. The grounds were partitioned so that everyone would have ample room. We're always outdoor. For some people, it might have been considered to be a lot, but for the SPAT folks, they just came right up to bat with it and have been involved since the beginning of this thing. They've been involved in coming in with a lot of, and everyone wears a mask. I'm not wearing a mask right now. I have my mask. Rory said I didn't have to wear it when I blah, 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 blah. But we wear a mask the entire time on property. It's mandated by the governor. Hallelujah for that. And nobody's gotten sick. There are multiple opportunities for community folks to get involved in SPAT. If you have your own dock and it's certified, we take care of all the issues with that for growing at your own spot. If you don't have your own spot, we have a lot of growers here at the Cornell Marine Center in Southold. We have a Southampton annex at Tiana Beach that is going to run 60 plus strong in the upcoming year. This year we sold out because we limited it to COVID, but we might be able to open it up a little bit. That's been incredibly popular. There's a spot in Sag Harbor that you can get involved in as a community. The thing that most people ask me is, how much time do I have to spend on this? Do I have to basically quit my day job to do SPAT? And the answer is yes. No, that's not the answer. The answer is, whatever you want out of the program, you're going to get. If you want very little and you just want some oysters, you'll get that. If you want to put a lot of time and learn a lot of things, you can do that too. So it's for all that it's structured, it's also very resilient. It allows for community to decide how they want to get involved. When a new SPAT member walked in, I would say to myself, and maybe to them, I don't know what you want out of the program, but when you leave, you will know what you want out of the program. I don't expect anything from anybody. They expect more than I do, and we just provide the tools to make that happen. But I'm in the process of actually grooming somebody to take my place 10 years from now, because SPAT should continue as long as the Cornell extension of Suffolk exists, as long as the Marine Center and the Marine program exist. I think that SPAT is kind of an integral, or at least a fine component, and it shouldn't be lost. People used to say to me, oh, when you go, SPAT will end. That's not true. It's not about me. It's about the program and the people. So I will say that Leadership is key. I think we're seeing that more and more in our world, that leadership is really, really important. So with good leadership, the program should go on as long as it can go on, which is a long time. Shellabration was started by a fellow named John Kramer, who was early on a SPAT member and then became an oyster grower. And his intention was he used to have these great shellfish parties at his house. So he was really into shellfish and presentation. And so he thought, well, we should ramp up exposure to shellfish on the North Fork. And so he came up with the idea, and he ran the idea with us being a recipient and another partner, Rotary at the time, Greenport Rotary, to run this program to get people involved during the winter time, which was really quite ingenious of him. And that went off well, and so it increased each year until we're at where we are now, which is, I believe, our 8th year? I don't even know. It's all a blur to me, but it's been sold out, I know that, for the last couple of years. Now with COVID, it's virtual, so this is really quite fascinating to see how this is working out, because we have such dedicated people that love Shellabration. I really look forward to COVID ending, coming out of this, and especially for events like Shellabration, because the SPAT program and Shellabration and the things that I particularly do are not really conducive to virtual and social distancing. For all that they're not total anathema, we can work with it, but that's not what we do. We are hands-on, wet, happy, energetic, social people. And so Shellabration, again, is a celebration of that. And to do it remote and this whole event happening now is just to remind us that we're dedicated and we'll get through this. But really, in 2021, we want to have the real deal so that we can smile and hug each other and whoop it up. So I commend everyone for coming out virtually, and I look forward to all those happy times that we have coming forward, because they are coming. So I would love to thank everybody for all the support that I've seen in all the years with SPAT, Back to the Bays, Cornell Cooperative Marine, Cornell Cooperative of Suffolk in general. It's been really, really heartwarming to see how dedicated people are to have something in their community that means so much to them. The opportunities moving forward are going to be very good. I get so many interests and questions. We don't ever go away. We are a year-round opportunity. So feel free to reach out to us and absolutely continue your support so that we can do this every year and we can keep our program thriving in this environment, which is a good environment. We're learning a lot about ourselves in this kind of situation. New Yorkers have rallied in a tremendous way. And I'm proud of everybody. I'm proud of all the SPAT volunteers, and I look forward to seeing you in 2021.
And it's all done in a nice, neat packet. And the beauty is that all the user groups understand what the packet is and where they fit in to the scheme of things. They understand where they lie as a critical element to make it a success. And it will be all of their mutual assistantships, partnerships, good stewardship that will make this program work. Here in Southold, in other townships, and possibly anywhere else that people are interested in bringing this form of training to their community.
That truly is such an amazing program, and the dedication Kim has to his members and to community aquaculture is really just so inspiring. In case you didn't know before, we hope you now have a better understanding of what proceeds from this event support. And I think we could all agree, it's a contribution well spent. All right, who's ready for some more Shellabration pairings? Let's head over to Noah's restaurant and get a cooking demonstration from Chef Noah Schwartz himself.
So the dish that I prepared this year for our virtual Shellabration is a rather versatile dish. It's kind of based on a condiment, if you would, salsa verde, which is a fresh herb pesto using parsley, basil, mint, mostly still growing in my garden.
For the first step in our recipe we're preparing today, we're making a salsa verde, which is going to pair great with local seafood from the Peconic Bay. Salsa verde ingredients we have set up for today are parsley, basil, mint, olive oil, capers, a little bit of red pepper flakes, salt, garlic, Dijon mustard, a couple of anchovy fillets, a little bit of sugar in the raw, and some fresh lemon.
Nice. All right.
So to start this recipe, we're going to dump our herbs into our Roboku, essentially a food processor if you're cooking at home. A big bunch of each of these herbs, which is going to make about a pint to 3 cups of this in total. You could totally split this in half if you're working at home and don't need as much of this. It does keep for a while and also freeze as well. I'm adding about a tablespoon or so of Dijon mustard, a teaspoon of sugar in the raw, a teaspoon or so of kosher salt, about the same on some red chili flakes.
Smells good.
A couple of cloves of fresh garlic, a couple of anchovy fillets. You can use more or less of this depending on how funky you like it. I like it a little funky. Some fresh capers.
Okay.
These are actually brined capers that I've rinsed, so this does not come out super salty. I'm going to squeeze a couple of fresh lemons in here. This will give this dish a nice bright acidity. If you have them on hand, always a fresh lemon is better than some store-bought or refrigerated lemon juice.
Right.
And now we can start the blending process. As this goes in the food processor, to keep it going, we'll just slowly drizzle our olive oil in here to kind of emulsify this and create a smooth pesto-like consistency. This is about a cup and a half of olive oil. And that should be just enough to get it all going. And then to finish it off, I use a little bit of a nice French, rather Spanish sherry vinegar. This also adds a little bit of acidity and brightness to the salsa verde, also only about an ounce or so. We'll let this go for about a minute until it comes together in a nice smooth consistency, and then we'll kill it. We don't want to overblend it. That tends to chop the herbs a little bit too much and maybe make some black spots on it. Okay. It'll also create a little bit of heat in your machine, which you don't want to do.
You're not cooking it.
Correct. So here's the consistency we're going for. Kind of a nice smooth consistency, but without being a puree.
Again, it smells good.
Cool. So now we're going to prepare the steamed local Peconic Bay little neck clams with our same salsa verde as the base in a great broth of white wine using one of our favorite Sauvignon Blancs locally produced by Saltbird Cellars. And at the end we will enjoy a nice cold glass of this with our steamed clams.
Nice.
So in a nice hot pan, we're just going to start with a nice hot dry pan and drop in, I guess we're working with about a pound of clams.
We're gonna hit that with a little bit of our white wine and cover it to steam them open. Nice dry white wine. Let that burn off just a touch. Now we're going to use our salsa verde in the same steaming hot pan of clams, and a good couple of tablespoons in there. I'd say somewhere around a quarter cup. Probably working with a little more a generous farmer's dozen in there. Let that kind of coat the clams and cover to steam. Hard clams take a little longer than mussels or even oysters to cook, so we're going to give this a good 5 minutes covered on a high heat and then take a look and see if we need a little more time. Now we're going to take our salsa verde and put about, I don't know, around a tablespoon or so onto each of these freshly opened Peconic Gold oysters. One of our favorites from the Peconic Bay.
They're good size too.
These are a nice meaty oyster. And then we're just going to top that with a nice light sprinkling of some Parmesan cheese. And these will go in the oven at about 400 to 450 degrees for about 10 minutes, but keep an eye on them. Now it looks like our clams are pretty much where we want them. Our salsa verde is really soaked into our clams. And to finish, I like to use just a little bit of creme fraiche, cultured cream. You could use sour cream. You could hit it with just a touch of heavy cream. Creme fraiche tends to have just a little bit of tang, and it'll brighten this dish up and kind of lighten up our sauce a little bit. At this point, you can serve these clams as is. They're also great over a pasta, over some grilled bread to just kind of soak up all the juice. And the same salsa verde goes great on our oysters. Same preparation could be done also with soft clams known as steamers, or even great with mussels, and save you a little bit of time in the steaming process. Now that we're ready to serve, I like to get a nice big bowl. Use a pair of tongs to just really coat this together. Go ahead and pour our beautiful salsa verde broth in. Dump our clams in. Voila. A little fresh parsley to finish, adding some beautiful color. So now after about 10-15 minutes or so, keeping a close eye on them at about 4 to 450, we're ready to pull our oysters, and they should be just starting to bubble up. Our Parmesan cheese should start to become a nice golden brown crust, and we're pretty much ready to serve.
Wow, beautiful.
Well, as a local resident and business owner, the marine environment is especially important to me because it plays a vital role in our economy as well as sustenance. A lot of my ingredients are sourced from the bay, and the health of the bay is directly related to the quality of those ingredients and to the health of those ingredients for the customer to consume. I've been a big supporter of the Cornell Cooperative Marine Extension Program for as long as we can remember. My restaurant is based a lot on seafood that comes directly from the Peconic Bay. I work very closely with a lot of baymen and oyster farmers directly. And so as they've grown to help and grow that industry out here, we've always kept in touch and participated however we could in fundraisers and different events, going back to several years ago where we did an experimental marine kelp dinner with kelp that was locally grown by the Cornell Cooperative but hadn't been used in a multitude of culinary ways quite yet. And so we were able to do like a 4 or 5 course pairing menu with kelp in all sorts of different ways, going from savory all the way to kelp chocolate cake for dessert, and it was a lot of fun. So this year we'll all be enjoying Shellabration virtually in a very different kind of way. I hope everybody enjoys what they get to prepare at home, and we really look forward to get to welcome everybody back into our restaurants in Greenport when we can celebrate Shellabration here again soon.
We're looking forward to celebrating with you again too, Chef Noah. Thanks for that amazing demonstration, and thank you for supporting us each year and partnering with us on so many fun Back to the Bays events. Part of the Back to the Bays initiative involves presenting ways to get involved in our many stewardship projects. Each year, we present our Ways to Give Back to the Bays campaign, featuring opportunities to do, learn, enjoy, and give back, all in support of our bays. We're able to offer these experiences thanks to proceeds from special events like Shellabration and our membership program. We've been able to plant eelgrass, oysters, clams, and scallops at our Back to the Bays stewardship sites and engage the public in these unique activities. Your support will help expand upon these efforts. Please take a moment to learn more about this vital work. Our 2021 Back to the Bays memberships are now available for pre-order. Our featured artist will be Marissa Botari of Elementology Designs, and our new membership decals and packages will be ready to ship next month. If you pre-order using code SHELLABRATE, you will also get a reusable tote as our gift to you. Head to backtothebays.org to order, and while you're there, check out our new marketplace featuring all sorts of apparel and home goods printed with local species artwork created by Carolyn Monaco. Next up, we have a very special segment for you featuring our aquaculture specialist, Greg Rivara. Greg has something brewing at his house in Greenport. Let's go see what he's up to.
Hey, Greg.
How are you?
Good, man. How you doing?
Good.
Good. So, what do you got here?
So this is my homebrew setup I built a number of years ago, and I'm making a milk stout today. And it's called a milk stout because it actually is made with lactose, which is a milk sugar, and it's infermentable, or unfermentable I should say, by brewing yeast. So it lends a little bit of a sweetness to the beer and a little bit of a mouthfeel, unlike a dry stout like Guinness. And it's going to have chocolate and coffee overtones. It's a really good winter beer, and I'll serve it on a nitrogen faucet. So it'll have a really, that really big head that takes a while to build up, like Guinness does. And I'm starting with a bunch of different grains here, including roasted, some chocolate malt, that's the darker things, and then you'll see the flaked grains. There's oats and flaked barley in this, as well as a base malt of just 2-row barley from England. So we're going to basically turn this pump on and put some water into this cooler. It's called a mash tun, and it's where the mash happens. So we're going to convert the starches in those grains to fermentable sugars through enzymatic processes. You see the water's coming up, and I've got rice hulls in there, and the rice hulls just aid infiltration. They don't add any flavor to the beer. And those copper pipes are simply a false bottom. Allows me to drain this sweet wort later on after about 90 minutes of mashing. And I'm going for like 151 degrees Fahrenheit for this particular beer. Just slowly add the grains in here. And this is a good beer to pair with, it's really good with chocolate, cheddar cheese, any kind of chocolate cake dessert. People make milk stout floats using this and some vanilla ice cream in it. It's actually quite good.
Is it a darker beer?
It's a darker beer. You'll see when I do some runoff, you'll see the color from that roasted and chocolate malt.
Yeah, you can smell it now.
You can smell it and see it. And it has really good coffee flavor. So, and most brewers like coffee. They're not drinking beer. And as far as food pairing in general, the stronger the beer, the stronger the food. So like a double IPA, which is really hoppy and probably could be 7-8% alcohol. That goes with spicy foods, Mexican food, Szechuan, those kind of things. And then lighter foods with lighter beers. So salads would be a Pilsner, which is a type of lager, a light ale. And I'm using a mash rake here just to make sure there's no dough balls. So you want to break up and make sure that this is all saturated and there's no dry spots in it as you add it. You see, break up those balls like that.
How hoppy is this going to be?
It's not going to be hoppy at all. Most stouts are not hoppy. And it's funny because a lot of people see like Guinness and they say, that's like motor oil. It's got to be a heavy beer, and it's actually, Guinness is only like 3% alcohol or so. And this will be a little bit more. This will be more like 5% alcohol. But it's still not a heavy beer. It just looks that way. It's the roasted malts that give it that color. So darker beers don't mean stronger beers necessarily. And as far as oysters go and shellfish in general, I like a lighter beer, not a stout. And honestly, all this talk about food and beer pairing, whatever you like is good. There's no set rules really. If you want to have, a double IPA with salad, and have a party, do it. I like a Hefeweizen with shellfish, a lighter beer, a wheat beer, or a light ale. Something like Greenport Harbor, the Harbor Ale, their flagship beer, goes really well with all this. And we have a lot of great breweries on Long Island. We're really lucky that way.
Yeah. Big surge in breweries over the past 10 years.
Yep, we've kind of followed the wineries there. And yeah, people are making trips just for the beer now.
Yeah, that's got a nice smell to it.
Yeah, it's kind of a great smell. It's pretty wholesome. Dump the rest in. I'm almost out of water, so that's good.
Okay.
And
this is the water's hot, right?
Yes, it's about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature of the water affects how things ferment. So generally it's between like 148 and in the high 50s perhaps. Generally 150, 152 is a normal brew, a normal mash I mean. And I'll do, like I said, this will sit here for about 90 minutes.
Okay.
And that's the end of that. So that looks good. Don't need that anymore. What we're gonna do is we're gonna let some of this flow out. So you can see some of the color coming through now. And this will get darker as it boils. So what I'm doing is you'll see grain fragments in here. I'm trying to get rid of all the grain fragments. And then ultimately this wort, it's called wort now, it's not beer yet. This will run through this coil in here. So that's the water in there is about the same temperature as the mash, maybe a little bit higher. And that's heating that coil in there. It's a heat exchanger. And you see it's twisted like that, so it gives a little more surface area in the copper. And this will keep this mash at a good temperature, besides the installation of the cooler. And then that water will be used to rinse or sparge the mash tun, the wort, and get it into this boil kettle on my right here, where the beer will be boiled. That's how I also heated up the water for the mash. The whole beer pairing thing, I mean, people always think about wine pairing,
right,
with cheese and foods, but I mean, there's so many more. I love wine and I love my winemaker friends, but beer is so much more versatile and there's so many more types of beer than wine. And a lot of people don't even know what they can do. Like this beer would be great with a buttery cheddar, like an English aged cheddar cheese. But it could also be used with like a barbecue if you wanted to.
Well, yeah, because you have like a sweet barbecue or something like that too. Yeah, you go on more rather than a rub or whatever. You can do like a, a sweeter.
Well, this could be used for, your marinade, and also, drink it with the.
Oh yeah, okay.
With the meal when you're done.
Now, would you recommend like using this for like a shellfish, recipe? Could you,
You could use this in a batter to do like a fried oyster for po' boys, that kind of thing. That could work.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah. So now this is going to get hooked up.
So now the whole wort and all that is going to be circulating through that.
Right. Basically, this is called a sparge arm. So right now this will be used. The wort will come back through these copper pipes, and in a gentle flow, like a very gentle fountain. And later it will be used for the hot water. The same thing. So I adjust these depending on the batch, up and down.
And what's your total batch that you could do in gallons?
This is about a 10-gallon batch, plus or minus.
But you could do how much more or no?
This will do much more, but the boil kettle is the limit.
Okay.
So I've got a larger boil kettle here that I haven't even used yet, but this can do a 20-gallon batch. And ultimately, the beer will go into this fermenter. That's a jacketed fermenter. It's a really nice setup. It's about a 15-gallon fermenter that allows me to control the temperature of the beer. And you see, it's all these sanitary fittings that professional breweries use. So it's real nice. And I'm using these old soda kegs to keg my beer in.
Looks like a fancy conical.
It is a conical. It's actually similar to what we use in the hatchery.
Right.
And in fact, the shellfish conicals we use have that same 60-degree cone that these do. And they were actually taken in the 1950s and 60s from wine fermenters.
Okay.
That's how the whole conical thing started. It's a really nice way to harvest the yeast in this case, or to keep your larvae, your shellfish larvae, in suspension, and there's no dead spots because the bubbles are coming from the bottom. We don't aerate that, obviously, but so yeah, so that's about it really. Now we'll wait 90 minutes. We'll add hops and boil it for again 90 minutes. So that's like 3 hours right there. Prime it. And you can see when I tilt it up, it's all coming out the back. So now it's flowing through that coil, it's heating up, it's getting the air out, so it's going from the bottom up.
And when does the fermenting process take place?
I'll add yeast to that conical once the beer is chilled.
Right.
And I use a plate heat exchanger. This is kind of similar to what we use in a hatchery to heat up our seawater. This is stainless steel. We use titanium, but you basically have, cold water coming in from your faucet, your groundwater, and then your hot wort going in. So it's a counterflow heat exchanger, and each one of these plates, so it's going like this, around and around, and it's taking the heat away. Because if we take this boiling wort and put it in the fermenter and pitch yeast on it, you'll kill the yeast. So we have to bring it down to about 70, 72 degrees for this beer, Fahrenheit. And I'll leave you with these words: eat and drink local. I mean, we've got such a great cornucopia out here of, drink responsibly, but we have great alcohol out here.
Right.
Everything from distilleries to wineries and, of course, the breweries. And we've got so much seafood. Here's to you, and happy celebrating.
Yeah, good stuff.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg, for taking some time to talk oysters and beer with us. You know what goes well with beer? Fish and chips. Let's head over to Ellen's on Front and learn how to make this dish from Chef Jenny.
Shellabration last year, we were the new kids, and we're like, we're gonna be super cool and give away pints of any tap beer for $3. That was our Shellabration deal, and Jenny did this beautiful local scallop dish with I believe it was a carrot puree and a turnip puree. It was absolutely stunning, and we got swamped. We are a tiny little restaurant with 49 seats, and we did over 400 dishes in the 3 hours that Shellabration was on.
About a year and a half ago that we opened, and yeah, I've always, my family's had a house in East Marion for almost 40 years. We grew up in the city, but I came out here during, summers during college. My first kitchen job was out here. I worked throughout college during summers out here, and it was always a dream of mine to open a restaurant in Greenport.
I've been working in restaurants for 15, 16 years, and it was the most tired I've ever been after any one shift. But it was also very fulfilling to meet all these new people coming in and see that people were searching us out specifically for Jenny's food, and then to see our staff really get their tushes kicked in the off season on a Sunday that no one ever expected it to be that crazy. It was awesome. It was awesome is the word.
I mean, I think being out here with the produce, with the seafood, I think that was a big appeal as far as opening a restaurant is concerned. For me, that was a big plus compared to the city, which is where I worked for the last almost 15 years or so. So yeah, I mean, we have a very good relationship with Charlie from South Old Fish Market. He provides us fish for here, and also Jenny's at Drosso's, which is our pop-up snack bar. And I think having a relationship with your purveyors is really important as far as cooking goes. So yeah, same thing goes with produce as well.
Okay, so let's get into your food and what you're cooking for Shellabration.
So I'm making fish and chips. This is a very popular dish in America, in England, in Ireland, everywhere around the world, I guess, but it's really popular here. And we are using local fluke. I would say that any kind of flaky white fish is great for fish and chips. A lot of times I'll use porgy when it's in season. That really makes nice fish and chips, but really anything flaky and white and not too delicate, kind of meaty but not too meaty like a sword, that would not make a great fish and chips. But yeah, so. Also,
is there a price point there which is important, or does that matter?
Yeah, fluke is abundant. There's a lot of it, so the price of it is very reasonable, as is porgy, which I'm happy to see. Porgy is being used more and more at restaurants in New York because it's really tasty and there's a lot of it. So. And
it's truly a local
and that's a real local fish, yes. And so is fluke. So. Right. Yeah. So I'm going to portion the fish. Cut down the middle here. I'll make, some nice sizes that you want. We usually go 4 or 5 pieces in order. So I'd say that's good for us right now. Back here. So the batter is pretty simple. It's so I've got 2 cups of cornstarch, 2 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm going to make a dry and a wet batter. So I'm going to take half of that, about a cup. This is all estimate. It doesn't have to be perfect. So about a cup and a cup-ish. Do the same in this bowl, a cup and a cup. I've got some baking powder, so about a tablespoon in each, and some salt. So again, about a tablespoon, I'd say, of salt. So this is a beer battered fish, which is pretty popular. We'll whisk these together. So I'm using a Belgian style beer from North Fork Brewing Company. I'd say a Belgian style, or a lager or a pilsner, something not too strong. Like I wouldn't use an IPA for this, but you can use Bud Light, you can use, but we like to use a local brewing company around here. So
it's really up to you and up to what you feel like you're trying to shoot for a flavor of
exactly.
sorts. Yeah.
You want it pretty, you don't want anything too strong. Like I said, like an IPA or something like, Guinness would be a little too,
Right.
stout would be too strong.
Then you
Unless you really want that beer flavor, this is enough. This kind of beer or a lager or pilsner it is pretty neutral, so you can taste it, but it's not overpowering. So yeah, so I have my 2 equal batters. I'm gonna make a wet batter here. And you basically, you want the consistency of like a thicker pancake batter. You want it to run, you don't want it to stick too much, which is actually fine. But it's a bit thicker than a pancake batter, but close to it. So whisk that in. So this is the consistency. It's runny, but not too runny. It's still pretty sticky. So that, and we'll go to the fryers and take our fish and stuff here. So we're using deep fryers. You can definitely do this in a pan with, you know, like about 1 inch of oil or so. But deep fryers are a lot easier. So if you have one,
especially in a restaurant.
Yeah, if you have a tabletop fryer, that would work as well. Or if you want to just fill up like a pot, like a heavy bottom pot, or a Dutch oven with oil. If you have a candy thermometer, set it at 350. What we're going to do is we're going to do the dry first. Get this all coated. Shake off any excess. Put it in the wet. Then coat it.
So you want it to stick enough to...
You want it to stick, yeah. And then like I like to use the side of the bowl to kind of get off any kind of excess, but all the fish is covered in this wet batter.
Right.
And then just drop it in. Do it here. They like to stick, so you gotta make sure once they're all in to shake the fryer. Shake that. Drop our fries. Obviously, we deep fry our fries as well, but you can definitely do some oven baked fries or fry your fries in your air fryer.
This looks like a full meal. Is this what you serve at Shellabration?
This is a bit larger. This is like the portion we serve for dinner service here or lunch. But I would serve probably, you know, 1 piece of fish, a couple of fries with tartar sauce, and some lemon and malt vinegar if you want. So
cool.
yeah, this is for your meal at home, you know, for dinner for 1 or 2 people.
Okay.
Fry.
Very nice.
So we serve ours with mushy peas, which is a traditional English side dish. Typically they're made with marrow fat peas, which are not very common here.
Okay.
Which is a mature dried pea. I use frozen peas, which are sweeter. I like them more. But yeah, it's cream and butter and water, cook the peas, blend it, and that's it.
It's something to look forward to and something to keep your spirits up about too. Like, you know, this is a really hard time for everybody too, and it's hard to be isolated, and it's hard for us to like not have our standard go-tos, like, again, maritime celebration, even the Christmas tree lightings. So like if we can like all do our part to make sure that we can have a celebration next year, it's definitely something to look forward to. Shellabration is a force to be reckoned with. I will never underestimate Shellabration again as a small restaurant. Last year we had 3 people staffed for that day, and I think we ended up with chef's entire family here working. So it's definitely a force.
Bunny and Chef Jenny fearlessly came on the Shellabration scene last year, not quite knowing what to expect, and did an incredible job as they were inundated with all of those hungry Shellabrants. Thanks for featuring a local fish species in your dish this year. Shellabration isn't all about oysters after all. We'd like to now take an opportunity to provide some information about local sustainable seafood options and why it's so important to choose local fish.
We have this great resource here on Long Island, an abundance of fresh local species, and that includes striped bass, fluke, black sea bass, scup or porgies, that's the same thing, squid, bluefish, sea scallops, blackfish, weakfish, oysters, clams, the list goes on and on, the species that are local here on Long Island. The fact is that over 90% of the seafood consumed in the United States is imported from other countries, and an equal amount of what's landed in the United States is exported to other countries. So it doesn't seem to make sense that we have this great product here, yet we're not utilizing it, and you can't beat the freshness. So we went fishing this morning. All the fish that we caught today will be in the market later today and tomorrow. We'd like to teach consumers that the species that are landed here locally are an alternative to a lot of the imported farm-raised species. We are trying to raise awareness of what species are local, where consumers can purchase local seafood, and also market local seafood as Long Island Fish, which is an acronym for Fresh, Indigenous, Sustainable, and Healthy. So we are looking for alternative markets and distribution points for local seafood in cooperation with fish markets, fishermen, the industry, primarily focusing on promoting community-supported fisheries programs on Long Island.
A lot of commercial fishermen here on Long Island, and we have quite a fleet of boats on the east end, Montauk, Shinnecock, Mattatuck, Greenport, and it's very important to the community, and it's very healthy for us to eat fresh local fish.
We're a shipping hub for the North Fork where all the fishermen come and pack out and either ship out or we get to buy the fish as it comes in the door. Had a good run this spring, tremendous amount of fish. In May we packed out 100,000 pounds of local fish.
This is a porgy or scup, some people call it, right here in Mattatuck and Peconic Bay, both. There's more than plentiful this time of year. Super fun fish to go catch with your kids and stuff like that, just because it's a fairly easy fish to catch. On the lower end of the spectrum, people say, oh, there's too many bones in porgies and this and that, but this fish has no more bones than this fish, or this fish, or this fish, or this fish for that matter, okay? The bone structure in this, and I'll show it to you when we're done here, is the same as any one of these other fish. But once we fillet it, you'll see there's not a bone in sight, and the cage or the rack of the fish is exactly the same as the others. So that's that. And you can see there's, bones here, the spine, there's pin bones through here, and the rib bones, same as any other fish.
The local fish is good for you. It's some of this fish that's imported, it's farmed. We don't know what kind of water it comes out of. And people today are really health oriented, and that's why we want to give them the best fish, best quality fish that we can get them.
So for the project, we created a comprehensive website. It's at www.localfish.org. Residents can go to the site to learn about what species are local, what time of year those species are available, information about the fish, information about where you can buy local fish, whether it's at a fish market or a restaurant that supports the project or a community-supported fisheries program. Eventually, we'd like to be able to have the option where people can purchase seafood through local retailers on the site. So it's very informative for all aspects of local seafood.
It's been a very important part of Braun Seafood's history, and the whole North Fork. I mean, it's part of the history of who we are and what the North Fork is.
Thanks, Kristen, for all the work you and the CCE Marine Fisheries team are doing to promote sustainable seafood. check out localfish.org and follow Long Island Fish on social media for more information. All right, who needs a cocktail? Let's see what's shaking over at the Menhaden.
Our oysters are grown in 2 locations, so we have 2 different oysters, Yannicott oysters. The name came from the original name of the area that Southold is in. And we grow our oysters in very deep water on the bottom in cages. I also have another location, and that's inside the Peconic Bay. And these are our new ones. They're finally online. They're called Ultramarines. And they have a more complex flavor. She will explain it because she's actually much better.
Who is she?
This is Georgette.
Hi, Georgette.
Hi, I'm Georgette Mosier-Petrosky, and I'm a partner of Meg's for my oyster and cocktail salon regarding oysters, which is hosted in my Murray Hill brownstone back in Manhattan. And what I do is teach people the fine art of craft cocktail making and demystifying that art for them, while also teaching them how to shuck oysters and serve them elegantly. And I owe all of that shucking expertise to Meg, who taught me 2 summers ago. And once I learned, I just wanted to share that with everyone. We must have met nearly 20 years ago. We were both working on a documentary film about Maestro Anton Coppola. And Megan was interviewing the maestro. And we met while we were filming this for our friend. And Meg said, "You just gotta come out here full time. Just come stay with me in Chelsea." And I stayed there for a couple months and was the house bartender.
I've always loved the art of home entertaining, and I think oysters are one of the most beautiful things that you can present to your guests. I think it's a wonderful host gift to come instead of a bottle of wine with some shucking skills and a beautiful bag of bivalves. So, wonderful way to make yourself the life of the party and very much please your host.
Oysters are it's like a celebratory food. You usually have it, even if there's nothing to celebrate, it's like everyone sits down, takes a moment to relax, and it definitely is a food that brings people together.
So in 2016, I published a book in honor of my late husband, Sasha Petrosky. His seminal bar, Milk and Honey, both in London and New York City, basically put craft cocktails on the map. Began it in 1999, and it blew up worldwide. Everything's in there, including some cocktails that pair wonderfully with oysters. I'm serving 12 cocktails from this book in my oyster salons regarding oysters back in the city, and today we are going to demonstrate how to make 2 of them. The first one is exclusive only to the Regarding Oysters salon. It's called the Atabui. I learned not only shucking lessons from Meg, but I also learned how to fetch the oysters onto her boat. And the cocktail was named Atabui when Meg shouted to me to grab the buoy. She says, "Atta girl," and I said, "No, atta buoy." And I get this wonderful idea, what about a martini, 2-to-1, super wet martini that's finished with oyster liquor. So that's what this cocktail is finished. And then we also have a cornichon garnish, which is the buoy, and the salt of the oyster and saline spray on the top perfectly complements the pickling of the cornichon buoy in the cocktail. So Meg is going to be shucking some of her lovely oysters, extracting the oyster liquor into our dropper, which we will garnish the cocktail with. So for the Atabui cocktail, we're going to begin with 1 ounce of vermouth, dry, and 2 ounces of gin. This is a traditional wet martini, so we're not going to just wave the bottle of vermouth in front of it. We're actually going to use the vermouth. So you're going to start with a super chilled mixing glass, such as this. You're going to always start with your least expensive ingredient first. And then you are going to add 2 ounces gin. I like to add the ice after because it really affects the dilution and the water content of a martini, which should always be a factor. There's always about a half an ounce of water in every martini that comes from the dilution of frozen water. Once that's cold enough, you're going to strain that into a chilled coupe or a martini glass, whichever you have on hand. Strain as such. That's a perfect wash line between the glass and the cocktail, right there. Then we are going to take some of the oyster liquor that Meg has shucked from the oyster. Just add a little to the top of the cocktail. Finally, to finish, we are going to accessorize with a cornichon. This is your buoy, the attaboy cocktail. The cornichon imparts a beautiful pickle essence which complements the saline of the oyster and, in my opinion, is the perfect garnish for the attaboy. So the next cocktail that we have that pairs perfectly with oysters, particularly these yanikots, is a Fresca Plantina. This is one of the original milk and honey cocktails. Super simple to make. You can probably make this with what you have in your liquor cabinet, which is a tequila blanco, and what you might have growing in your garden, which is mint, and we're also going to use some English cucumbers. So we'll get started. Using a Boston shaker, which is one of these 2 parts that has a lovely lip, works like that, and we'll demonstrate that. You're going to build in your smaller tin. You're going to begin with about 3 or 4 mint sprigs. Get those little delicate gems from the top. And then use 3 cucumbers and reserve 1 cucumber for garnish. So you're going to put that in your tin. You're going to add 3/4 of freshly squeezed lime juice into your tin, and then you're going to gently muddle. As we like to say, bruise, don't abuse. Everything is in your tin. Now we're going to add 2 ounces of tequila. I prefer Espolòn. Ounces. Then we're going to do 3/4 ounces of mineral saline, which is just an elegant way of saying salt water. So 3/4 ounces of that into your tin. And then simple syrup, you're going to add 3/4 ounce. Like so. Everything is good to go. And we are just going to shake. We are going to first put our ice in our bigger tin. Pour our cocktail over the ice. Pour the ice back into the tin, back and forth. We're going to keep this on nice and solid with a tilt in the lip. Smack it on, and we're just going to give it shake, back and forth. You're never going to take it towards your guests. Don't do that. Take it away from them. Get the train out of the station. So, it's got a musicality to it. Maybe there's something you like to sing. Rosé, one size or or whatever. You pick it. Once it's sufficiently chilled, Gonna open it, give it a little back and forth, like so. Drain into that. Make sure your glass is extra cold before you add ice to it. And then we are going to strain right over. Move your gate forward so you can pour your ribbons over your cocktail. And then you are going to garnish with a cucumber slice. And there you have it, Fresco Plantino.
Cheers, celebrate.
Celebrate.
Wow, nice job, Georgette and Meg. Thank you so much for bringing some fun cocktails into the mix. If you want more recipes, check out Regarding Cocktails. One of you lucky Shellabrants will actually be getting a signed copy if you win our Shellabration raffle. We'll pull that once the event closes on December 31st. Now that you have a drink in hand, let's head back to our facility in Southold and learn about a different kind of liquid in our algae room.
Hello, Shellabration people. So, to those who know me or see me already, my name is Josh. Those who don't know me, hi, my name is Josh. I'm normally in the larger hatchery we have here on campus, but today I thought I'd kind of come and kind of show you some very exciting projects going around the Cornell Cooperative campus. So, right now I'm in what kind of looks like a experimental area that we're growing crazy stuff, but what this actually is an algae lab. And the very exciting thing about this algae lab is that it's part of our SPAT program. So our SPAT program, which I'm sure you've seen a video on this before, is a volunteer-based program where people can come in and pretty much learn how to grow their own oysters. But throughout the years, the program has just expanded and expanded. And so what's really exciting these past couple of years is I've had the wonderful opportunity to work directly with the SPAT program and help them develop their own algae lab. So this is huge for the program because now this program has the potential to raise oysters, you know, on their own, independent from soup to nuts. They can spawn, they can condition, they can do everything. And so the really neat part and how that kind of relates to Shellabration, how everything goes together, is most, if not all, the shellfish you're eating right now during Shellabration comes from a hatchery. So in order for a hatchery to, work, and in order for you to grow shellfish in a hatchery setting, you need algae to do so. And so that's where this relates in that overall scheme of everything. But with that being said, I wanted to introduce everybody to this. Here is Charlie. He is one of the pilot members of the algae SPAC program, and I could teach him everything in the world, but it really takes a person to, really absorb the information that, being given in order to be as successful as him and his lab and his crew has been. So I'm going to kind of give the reins to Charlie, and we're going to give you kind of a little more detail, a little bit more history, and a little bit of tour of what the SPAT program is doing, and also how you, SPAT members, can get involved in growing your own algae as well if you so choose to do so. So I'll take it away. Charlie, all you, my friend.
Hi there. I'm the mad scientist, otherwise known as Charlie the Algae Guy, and welcome to our new algae room. The SPAT program has existed for roughly 20 years, and for the first 17 and a half years of that, the SPAT program had to beg, borrow, or steal algae to feed the larvae of the oysters that we grow each year to provide SPAT members with. But thankfully, 3 years ago, Josh was hired as part of the New York State-funded CLAM project, and he was very willing to show us how to grow algae. And 2 years ago, starting in the greenhouse, that Josh was able to abandon for the new clam building, we started growing algae. So how do we grow algae? Well, it's much like going to school. First you go to elementary school, then you go to high school, and then maybe you go to college. It's much like that. We start out with a culture, something like this. We grow it. When it gets green enough and thick enough, we graduate it to a bigger flask, and we grow it in there for a couple of weeks until that grows to a point where it's thick and concentrated, and then we transfer it again to one of these carboys, and we grow it in these carboys for a couple of 3 more weeks.
Oh, you're kind of close up. How great and delicious the algae look. So Charlie, everything is really dark in here. So when I think of algae, right, I'm thinking of, green stuff that just grows on the side of my house or in a pool. So it's interesting that everything has all different colors, right? So can you tell me a little bit why, everything kind of is a little bit of a different color than what you normally would expect from when you think of algae?
Very true. I mean, the common perception of algae is it's something bad, but these are pure forms of algae, and we grow 4 different kinds of algae. And the reason we grow 4 different kinds is because the oysters that are conditioning the adults and the larvae thrive on different kinds of nutrition. And so each of these types of algae represent something that can benefit them at a certain stage of their life. So the most common one we grow is this green product called Tetrasolamus. They're great for adults, they're great for somewhat mature larvae, and they have absolutely everything. They're the sushi, the fried chicken, the pizza of oyster food.
Beautiful.
And so we have these other ones along here. This is called Pavlova. This is great for when the larvae are just spawned. They really love that. That's the rocket fuel of oysters. And then we have a couple more. We have something called CM, which is a Chetoceros style algae. And then we have something called ISO, which is sort of the general all-purpose hamburger, so to speak, of algae.
So, yeah, and just kind of going back to how this relates to all Shellabration and everything is, if you're eating a farmed organism, at one point in their life, they're eating these exact strains. So the strains that they grow and we all grow is kind of almost an industry standard of, algae that gives shellfish babies the best possible growth when they're in their most vulnerable stage, i.e. when they're larvae or little seeds and everything like that. Of course, it gets to a point where they can't eat the cultured algae anymore, and then they go to a field grow-out system. But, like I said, everything that you're eating, if it is an aquacultural organism, has eaten this algae at least one point in their life. That being said, there really is not much of a difference after they go into a grow-out system between a wild organism and a farmed organism. Unlike fish culture, shellfish culture, they're eating the same thing. The difference is the farmer has control of the survivorship of the organisms, and if you're growing oysters, the more you handle them, the better shell you're going to get and the meatier they're going to be. So that's really the only difference, so which is also really cool. But Charlie, continue.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Will you be mine? Will you be mine?
We have
just be my neighbor.
So we're going to follow Charlie to a couple different little areas to kind of give everybody a little more of a full circle of what goes on in this lab. So if you are a SPAT member and you want to, start growing your own algae, this is kind of what you would expect.
And we're doing very well here. This is a sort of a batch Milford method of growing algae, which we used last year. And the bigger picture of what this has enabled us to do is now we can grow as much algae as we need for the oysters, and the results in the last 2 years have been phenomenal. Each year we've produced about 2 million oyster seed, as opposed to previous 16 or 17 years where we were fortunate if we got 500,000 out of a year's work. So this is why this has been such a wonderful program. Thanks to Josh for being willing to teach us this, and it moves on each year with new advancements.
So Charlie, what do we have in here?
Well, in here we have grown-up oysters who are being conditioned. Conditioned means that they are fed for roughly 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, look, that looks familiar. That looks pretty
And
tasty.
He's been eating a lot, or she's been eating a lot. There's new growth along the shell. After 8 weeks, we hope to spawn them. And if we have a good spawn, we might get 10, 11, 12, 13 million larvae out of this one batch. And what we're doing here is feeding them a steady diet of a mixture of algae, so they have lots and lots to eat.
Yummy.
It's,
Yummy.
It's almost December now, not the normal time of year for oysters to spawn, but by keeping them inside and feeding them constantly, we're fooling them into thinking it's June. And we're hoping that by doing that, we'll get a new crop started in early January. And this is our latest project, which is, as I mentioned, we were using a Medford system, which is sort of like following recipes of batches, but now we're constructing what's called a CCAP system, and this will be a continual feeding system, which allows us to constantly feed the oysters or the larvae on a regular basis, so we don't have to be attending to it nonstop every hour, every day of the week. So we're just putting that together. And another hope that we have, not sure if it's really going to happen or not, we may have access to some solar panels, which we hope to put on the roof here, and then we'd have some sustainable form of energy production to help with the electrical bill.
Nice. So with that being said, to those new members who are joining the SPAT program and everything, there's some really fun and exciting things going on. And if you really want to learn how to grow your oysters and kind of get a soup to nuts education about it, highly recommend that you guys join. And at the end of it, you get your own shellfish to eat. So, I mean, it's kind of a win-win. Charlie, before we sign off, I'm just a little confused on one thing. So all the algae you have in here, where does it come from? Can you show me where, like does it just come from the air, or like what goes on?
Well, they initially start in a culture. And a culture basically means a flask with a very pure culture of the particular kind of algae that we might want to grow.
Can you show us these flasks? Are they in here, or are they in a different area?
They're in a different area. We'll show you that in the office. And initially, if you have no cultures, then a lot of people will purchase them from a company that provides them, and they usually come in a little test tube. And from there, they again get transferred to the smaller flasks and then go through the growing sequences until they end up in these big cylinders.
All right, so here we are in our final stop to look at our spat culture, stock culture area. So Charlie, so these are the seeds that pretty much fuel your entire algae system, right?
Yes, these are where it all starts. We maintain these year round, and we try to purify them during the off season by mixing the best cultures, and we have to transfer these from flask to flask every 2 to 3 weeks. So what we do is we have sterile flasks that we fill with seawater and then provide some food into them.
So what's this food? Is it just like a fertilizer, pretty much?
The food is basically a commercially prepared solution that has vitamins, electrolytes, things that algae really love.
Yummy.
So, for instance, we buy it in a 5-gallon container, but if we use something like this, a few drops in each flask, then the flask gets put in a sterilizer, sterilized, and then the next day when it cools, we do a transfer, which will be done tomorrow, where we would take a blowtorch, sterilize both, and then pour the old culture into the new flask, and then it gets rejuvenated.
So if anybody has watched kind of my vlog videos, if you guys seen that, it kind of looks familiar, right? Very similar methods in order to ensure that keeping everything clean, because shellfish larvae and algae, when they're at their smallest stage, need to stay clean. And if you have nice, healthy shellfish larvae, then you'll get a nice, happy, finished product that will be on your plate, and you'll be slurping down in no time.
Now I do keep one algae here. This is flesh-eating algae. When SPAT members don't behave, we have them drink a cup of this.
All right, so watch out, okay? But thank you, Charlie. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to show us this. So all in all, everything begins with algae. All the shellfish you're eating, everything always begins with algae. So, if you're a new SPAT member or, a already existing SPAT member, this is something that's, always in development. It's brand new, and it's very exciting that we have our SPAT members able to get, involved in everything from soup to nuts in the entire process. So for me, I think it's really cool and really exciting. Charlie, what do you think about it?
I think it's a lot of fun and a good challenge, and I really appreciate all of you for watching.
Yep, so thank you so much. Enjoy Shellabration. I'll be slurping down some oysters with y'all. So have a good day and celebrate safely and accordingly. Later, guys.
Oysters gotta eat too. Thanks, Josh and Charlie, for the in-depth look at all that goes into feeding all the shellfish produced by our SPAT program. Next up, we're going to tune in to a special Shellabration edition of our digital education podcast, where we'll get to meet some of our local oyster growers.
Welcome to Cornell Marine Program's digital learning podcast, Shellabration edition. The focus of this show will be on a very important aspect of Shellabration, and that's oysters, and more specifically, the incredible people who grow them. So let's get Mr. C on board so we can get this special Shellabration show started. Hey, Mr. C, today we're going to focus on a really special Cornell Marine Program event that starts today. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, Rory, I think it's the first weekend in December, so it must be Shellabration. What a great event. I look forward to this every year.
Yeah, I do too. And this is the 9th annual event. Such an important fundraiser for SPAT and Back to the Base. For this show, we're going to have some members of the Long Island Oyster Growers Association as special guests. But first, I want to introduce you to the Shellabration event director and an oyster lover. You know who I'm talking about, Mr. C?
I think, Rory, you're talking about Kim Barber. That sounds great, Rory. I'm really interested in hearing more about the event from Kim and getting to know the oyster growers.
Well, let's let her in. Hey, Kim, how you doing on this very special day of Shellabration?
Very special. Hi, guys. I'm doing well and so glad to be with you kicking off our virtual Shellabration event.
So tell us about the oyster growers' role in this event.
Sure. Well, we can't have Shellabration without oysters, and we don't have oysters without oyster growers. So if you've joined us for past Shellabration events, then you know that the first thing you get to experience when you pick up your wristband is a complimentary plate of freshly shucked local oysters, shucked by SPAT members usually. So it was really important to somehow still feature the local oyster industry as part of this event, as they've had a difficult year like so many of us have. So yeah, we hope you've taken advantage of the oyster deals that the growers made available for part of this event and are enjoying some of their oysters at your home. So what do you say? I think we should get to meet some of the growers and learn about what goes into oyster farming.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Let's start with some quick introductions. Why don't we start with Ben and Dave from Southold Bay Oysters.
Hi, I'm Ben, and this is Dave. We are the owners of Southold Bay Oysters, and we grow Southold Chindigs in the middle of Southold Bay.
All right.
Hi, I'm Steve Schnee. I am the owner of Founders Oyster Farm in Southold Bay. I grow oysters just off about a quarter of a mile off the beach from Founders Landing in Southold.
All right.
Hi, I'm Barley Dunn. I'm the owner of Shellworks. It's a family-run farm in Little Peconic Bay, and we're now offering our salty dog oysters.
Hi, I'm Meg. This is my husband, Cam, and we are the farmers for Yannicott Oysters on the North Fork.
All right. So let's jump right into the questions. I'm so glad that we have you guys here. It's awesome to have all you oyster growers. I'm a SPAT member myself, so I love them. So this is a question for everybody, and I just wanted to know how you guys got started growing oysters in this business. Maybe we'll start with Ben and Dave again.
My career in oysters began with a small article in the Suffolk Times that talked about the SPAT program. It was the first time I had never heard of it, and it was just up the street from where we lived, and it sounded intriguing. So I walked into the classroom there probably in the winter of 2013, started to learn about oysters. I knew nothing about oysters at the time. And then within a couple of years, all of a sudden we had a 10-acre lease site to go commercial through the Scout program. And then here we are today with an oyster farm.
Awesome.
Well, this is a second career for me. I spent almost 40 years working as a journalist at ABC News, and stars all aligned. I've always had a love for water, and I too learned about the SPAT program. And through Kim and Greg, I learned the art of oyster growing, the art and the science of farming oysters, and started on a farm parcel out in Southold Bay growing oysters.
So way back in 1997, my wife and I were Peace Corps volunteers in the South Pacific, and we ended up working on a black lip pearl oyster farm, growing these beauties, black lip pearl oysters.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that I've been smitten with shellfish ever since. So we did that for a few years. Came back. I got a master's degree down at Auburn, working with oysters in Mobile Bay, and then I got a job at the Ice Lip Shellfish Hatchery. Worked there for a few years, and then since 2004, I've worked at the East Hampton Shellfish Hatchery, managing that operation. And then just the last couple of years, we started our own farm, which is something I've wanted to do forever. So this year is actually the first year that we've had stuff come up to market. So I'm a relatively new family farmer, but I've been smitten by shellfish for a couple decades now.
That's awesome. Congratulations on your first year production. How about you guys, Meg and Kim?
I started at SPAT in 2007, and I went to the lectures. Then I followed up by, self-educating myself and taking other classes online. Worked for a few other farms and started to develop our farm in 2013. But my family were oyster farmers in Long Island from the early 1800s until the 1930s. So I'm kind of reviving our family legacy.
Oh, that's cool.
But I have a next question is for Ben and Dave. So I know growing oysters is really hard work. So what are some of the challenges you've had in growing oysters over the years?
So it is a lot of hard work. One of the biggest challenges is actually access to water, where we can have an oysters and be protected where the oysters are growing. Oysters will take the flavors based on the water where they grow. So you want to be unique, and you want to actually have a place where you know your oysters will develop a great flavor. The industry is being challenged right now. It's hard to make sure that you can be protected where your oysters are growing. It requires a lot of investment up front, but once you are in, you are really in. And now we are in the fifth year of production, and it's time to scale. And to scale, we need to make sure we have regulation and support for the fans. People love oysters. We're in a great trend. So I just ask people, keep eating oysters and find out where your oysters are coming from.
Right. That's cool.
Growing oysters, it's farming. And farming, it's low capital. Oyster farming is low capital, but high labor. It's a lot of work. It's dirty work. You're at the mercy of the weather. You're at the mercy of the tides. You're at the mercy of your equipment. So key is being prepared for long, hard days of hard work. Gear is heavy, it's muddy, it's dirty, it's wet, sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's incredibly hot. There are a lot of animals that cut into the oyster profit before you even haul them up to the deck, sort them, and bring them to market.
You know, a day in the life on the farm is just like Steve said, it's farming, it's labor intensive, but it's really enjoyable and really rewarding at the same time, especially when, in my case, I'm doing it with my family, teaching my kids how to do it. My wife already knows the drill, so we're just out there trying to work together, get through the day without me getting too crazy. But it's usually always a great day on the water.
I guess it's the opportunity to be producing a really great and special product in a sustainable way, and also to connect with chefs and people. Oysters are a celebratory food, and it kind of brings people together. And I also really just, it's rewarding to be able to work outside and problem solve, and it's also an adventure, which is a really part of it. That's what I really enjoy about it.
So Barley, why did you want to participate in Shellabration in support of CCE Marine program?
Well, firstly, my shellfish reason.
That's a good one. I like that.
To get my product and the name out, and the altruistic reason is just to support CCE, because without CCE you wouldn't have 3 of these growers on this board here. They're all SPAT members, and so without CCE you wouldn't have SPAT, and you wouldn't have all the great support and knowledge that comes out of CCE. So it's a great organization, and I really think it's helped in getting the word out about our marine environment and shellfish and aquaculture. So I'm really happy to be part of it. I haven't been able to participate in the real thing up in Greenport yet in the past few years, so this is the next best thing.
All right, well, this next question is for everybody. So as being oyster farmers, I know you have a product to sell. So, where do you sell your oysters?
Well, up until this year, COVID has taken a big hit on all of us. I used to sell predominantly to restaurants, but restaurants have been impacted. So as a result, chefs are not buying as many oysters. They're not setting up raw bars. That's been really difficult for most of the oyster farmers. Although I have been pretty successful at selling at vineyards and at breweries where I can actually sell retail, which has been the sweet spot for me as a farmer, to be able to shuck, serve, and chat up my oysters.
Yeah, I feel like the community here of farmers have sort of been really helping each other. So we're at another farm who started a pop-up farm stand, and we've done a few pop-ups like Steve, which has been really fun, but they are a lot of work, I have to say. And I've maintained some of my chefs in the city, but they are really struggling.
Yeah, in normal times when it's not a pandemic, we do sell a lot direct to customer. We are a smaller boutique oyster farm, so between pop-ups at vineyards, also at our farm tours, and special events as well, that's where we would sell the majority of our oysters. But what has been really impressive this year is, the customers, people really love their oysters. So when restaurants were closed and when people couldn't go out, I was really impressed with how many people were willing to just be adventurous and learn how to shuck at home and come pick up from our self-serve stands, bring the oysters home and enjoy them that way. You almost, can't keep the really passionate oyster eaters away from oysters. And they came out in a big way to help us. And for a lot of this summer, the self-serve oyster stand was the only way we could sell oysters.
Yeah, one more element that I'd like to add is that we saw the shift this year from people going to restaurants to buy oysters to actually learn to do it at home. And we were people, getting oyster knives and getting lessons. We decided to expand into new areas and trying to maximize the benefit of oysters. Oysters are actually very good for health and for your skin. So one of the things we did this year, we just expanded to launch a new whole bay oysters face cream. It uses ingredients that actually are extracted from oysters. We launched this early on the fall, and a lot of our customers are actually now reaching back to us and not buying it online. And you can get it as one of the benefits of being in Shellabration now too.
Really neat.
I got to get some.
Yeah, me too. Does it work up here too, guys?
We want to hear from you. What are your favorite ways to eat oysters?
We make a homemade cocktail sauce, which is fantastic. So you take Salho Bay oysters without Salho caustic sauce. Our recipe is online if you guys want to get it and make it at home.
Personally, I like my oyster straight out of the water, shucked with nothing on it, because oysters, they have the terroir. Wine has the terroir where they grow, the land that they grow in, the soil that they grow in, water. The oysters take the flavor of the water they grow in. And the Peconic Bay is a wonderful body of water. It has a delicious taste, and I personally don't like to mess up the flavor of the natural oyster?
I like to keep it simple too, just fresh, cold, and with a little shot of lemon, or just on the grill until they pop.
I love big oysters cooked on an open fire, and I put all sorts of things inside of them.
That's good too. I like that. What sorts of things? What's your favorite?
Bacon, wine, pesto, cheese. I mean, you can really put anything in there. It's like my favorite way to eat them.
So before Kim wraps us up with a final question, is there any other information you'd like to share with us and the viewers?
I mean, everybody's heard it, you know. That's just to be proud to grow them and proud to eat them, because you know they're I don't want to get too technical, but you're eating a low trophic level animal that requires very little inputs. It's a really green form of protein, and we just can't overlook that. You know, they're out there providing habitat, they're filtering the water, removing excess nutrients, and it's just, you know, there's really nothing bad about it.
The more oysters you eat, the more you help clean the bays.
Yeah.
No, that's
I
a really
never
big...
miss an opportunity to remind everyone that every oyster filters 50 gallons of water a day.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're supporting your local oyster farmers, you're also supporting your local water quality. So please eat oysters, save the world.
So 80% of seafood in the United States, even if a portion of that is caught here, it's exported to another country and then processed and then shipped back to the United States. And 20% of seafood in the United States is actually farm raised or grown in an aquaculture setting. And I really think it's important for us to buy local seafood and support our economies and our communities.
Absolutely. Well said, Meg. That's part of our fish program, Fresh, Indigenous, Sustainable, Healthy. And we're trying to get people to purchase from you guys, purchase from our local fisheries and stuff, so we don't have to export it and then import it again. So thank you for bringing that up. Cool.
So yeah, in the spirit of, you know, promoting the industry in general and so many of the great growers, I was hoping, you know, we could speak about the Long Island Oyster Growers Association for a minute. And Ben, I know you play an important role in that association, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about what the goals are, what you guys are up to, and yeah, what's going on.
So La Yoga brings together all the farmers in Long Island. Right now we have almost 100 farmers that are part of the organization right now. And I tell people that the New York oysters went from being the best oysters in the world in the late 1800s to the best kept secret in the world.
Mm.
So people who knows about them, but every day you keep finding people that, oh, I didn't know we had oysters in New York. We actually produce the best oysters you can find in the area. So we encourage people to get educated, to find out about the oyster farmers, and events like this, Shellabration, are fantastic for that. Oysters are part of a party, a celebration, and they go well with any young parents. So we want to thank you guys for hosting us tonight and also allowing us to educate people about the benefits of oysters.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I mean, this was really interesting, and I loved hearing your stories and some of the struggles that you guys have been through. I mean, it's like you said, it's hard work. I do like 4 lantern nets a year, and I go home and I'm spent, you know. So I couldn't imagine doing it full time.
We'll wrap this one up, the Shellabration edition here for now. So thank you, growers, for spending time with us today and participating in our virtual Shellabration, and of course for making your oysters available to enjoy at home for our Shellabrants this year. Be safe out there. We respect and appreciate everything you do, and thanks again for participating tonight.
Go Shellabration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Cornell.
Well done.
That was great to hear from our local oyster growers and learn how much work is involved in the dedication they have to this industry.
Yeah, Rory. Next time I slurp a raw oyster, I'll have a greater appreciation for all the hard work that goes into growing oysters.
Definitely. Now, before we go, here's a hint. If you're playing Shellabingo, congrats. You could check the Get to Know an Oyster Grower box, and you're one step closer to winning some of those awesome prizes.
Now that's our show for today. Thanks again to Kim and the oyster growers for joining us, and thank you for your support of Cornell Marine Program through participating in this event. We really appreciate your support, especially through this year.
To see our discussion with the oyster growers in its entirety, check out the link to the full-length podcast on the event website. We're now going to check back in with Chris Pickerel, who will provide some historical perspective on oysters and show us his impressive collection of antique oyster jars.
Okay guys, welcome back to my house. We're in the bar area now. As we know, Shellabration is all about good food and drink. But what I wanted to talk to you about now is kind of one of my passions, and that's antiques related to oysters and to drinking. So what I have here is part of my collection across the bar. And what I want to show you is some oyster jars, as well as some of the drinking vessels that would have been used at the time. So we span a period of about just before the Revolution, 1774, through 1800, 1820, into about 1840. And this is all focused on New York City. So you may or may not know that New York City was known for its oysters back in the day. And if you haven't already, I recommend you read this book, The Big Oyster, by Mark Kurlansky. It's a great, great book. Got a lot of interesting facts. Takes you, a couple sittings to read through it, but it's wonderful. So look at that. But anyway, I want to kind of drill down into oysters in Manhattan. And beginning with these things over here, this is an oyster jar that would have been used in Manhattan in about 1774, just before the Revolution. And this was used to hold pickled oysters or fried oysters. They would also put pickled lobster in these as well. So you ask, well, why are they going to pickle it? Well, the problem was they didn't have refrigeration, so now we can put things in a refrigerator, or we could put them in a freezer theoretically, or whatever, many options now. Back then, they could not do that, and it was not legal to harvest an oyster in and around Manhattan during May, June, July, and August. So if they wanted to eat oysters, which were very popular back in the day, during the summer they had to have them preserved in some way. So the best way to do that was through pickling. So they would combine vinegar, some salt, heat them up in a big cauldron, and you had pickled oysters. Now that was a very important export from Manhattan back then. So everybody knew about Manhattan oysters, New York oysters, and they ate them all around the world. So ships' captains would bring them from the port of New York to wherever they were going. So the vessels that you see here, these ceramic stoneware vessels, these straight-sided examples like this guy here, and these through here, kind of very simple, almost like Coke cans. They were used for shipping the oysters. So the oystermen would harvest the oysters in Manhattan Harbor, New York Harbor, so from Staten Island, New Jersey, the Hudson, the East River, up into the Sound. They would bring them back to lower Manhattan, and they would shuck them and then pickle them and put them in these jars for sale. The great thing about pickling them was not only the preservation, but was the value as well. So I can't tell you what the market value would have been back then, but the value of a pickled oyster was 6 times what a shucked oyster was. So think about that multiplier in terms of making money for somebody working on the water. So it's pretty exciting. So anyway, getting back to kind of the timeline here. So these are the earliest ones that I have. But what I've also done is pair with it a wine bottle from the same period. So this is from about 1778 or so, as well as a glass, because trends change over time, so things change. The bottles change, the vessels change, all these things change. I also have this oyster shell, which is pretty cool. This one was found in lower Manhattan from about a 1780 context. Looks like our oysters today, but it's a pretty big boy. It's neat to see. So I have those together. If you're going to have oysters in your home, you might have a jar like this. So again, oysters were very popular. Pickled oysters were the thing back in the day. This was a jar that would not be great for shipping because it has these curved, what are called ovoid sides. It's a very attractive looking vessel to me, but it wouldn't be good on a ship. So these guys, this was made by a gentleman named John Remy, and it's Manhattan Wells, New York. So this is kind of where City Hall is, where there was a place called Collect Pond. This was made there. So this would have been filled with pickled oysters or other preserves. stored in the home on a shelf with a piece of cloth over it with a string around it to keep the bugs out. So as long as you had that vinegar above the oysters, they would last for 5 or 6 months. You're good to go. So getting back to kind of the transport of oysters, so again, the export market for oysters, you've got these oyster jars. And this is kind of the period I really like, which is like 1795 to maybe 1820 or so. And these are some typical oyster jars from my collection. This is a larger one, similar to this earlier one that I showed you from the 1700s. Not much different, a little bit different on the top. What I should point out is that for all these, they would have had a cork and they would have put wax over them to seal them. And that's why they have these little, either these recessed wells or these little grooves here. So for these guys, what was really amazing about this set of jars here and kind of this time period is that these jars were made by a very famous African-American potter. So while there was slavery going on in Manhattan, there was an African-American potter who had a thriving business making oyster jars and vessels like these. Also, the oystermen that he made them for happened to be African-American. Again, they were slaves there, but they were free blacks who were making their living either being a potter or raising oysters or harvesting oysters. So this is one here, Daniel Johnson on Lumber Street, New York. Another one here is George White. But these are famous gentlemen of their day. They were pretty well off considering the profit they were making. And these jars were shipped all around the world. So these are typically found in places like South America and the West Indies because they were shipped from Manhattan 3,000 miles down the Atlantic to these places where there were sugar plantations. Talking about the other things in this grouping, this is a typical bottle from about that period, about 1800. This is a gin bottle. I love gin. This is a gin bottle that was excavated in Lower Manhattan, so it kind of goes with this grouping. It's really neat to kind of look at the patina of this after it's been on the ground for a couple hundred years. And then if you're going to eat these oysters, you would have to put them in some kind of vessel. So this is a porringer from the same period, about 1800. Here's a fork. This fork is a little bit later, but this is the utensil you would have used. So I like to think about who used these, who touched these. So there was a potter that had to go out and dig the clay, either in Manhattan or New Jersey, bring it back, fire it at 2,000 degrees to make these jars. You had an oysterman who was harvesting the oysters, bringing them back, preserving them, putting them into the jar. Then this jar would be put onto a vessel in a crate with 11 others, shipped 3,000 miles, eaten down there, and then discarded, and then it gets flown back up to me. So it's kind of an interesting story. Another really cool story is this oyster shell actually came from under the World Trade Center. So this was found, there was a ship that was excavated under the World Trade Center. This was an oyster that was found amongst those remnants. This is a drinking glass from the same period, about 1800, 1810. A little different than that one over there. And then moving on to the kind of 1830 period, things get a little bit more refined. The glasses can be a little bit fancier. This is a typical oyster jar from that period for shipping. This gentleman's name was Henry Scott, another, again, African-American. This is a larger version of the same jar. And again, this would have been for pickled oysters. And this bottle is one that would have been typical of that period, but it has what's called a seal on it. So it would have been a well-to-do person if you were an attorney or a doctor or a merchant, more likely. You would have bottles made with your name impressed on them, and you would reuse them. In fact, this one was used many times. This label is from probably the 30s or the 40s, but this bottle was made in about 1830 or so. So it's neat to see, again, them together. And then getting you either further in time, you've got this jar, which says Clark Oysters, which I don't think it was New York. It may have even been Canada, but it's nice that it says oysters on it. And that's from like the 1850, 1860 period. And that's a little bit bigger. And then last but not least, this is a jar that was used for pickled oysters. And this one, it says Superior Pickled Oysters, put up for family use. That's a term they use, put up, so stored. This is from New York. And the label's kind of damaged, but it's cool to see this. And one of the neat things is that if you think about that, they use these corks, and they use kind of the same openings. So this same size cork here, so it's kind of cool to see that. So thanks for spending the time to look at my collection of artifacts relative to the oyster industry from New York. Obviously, it was a big thing back in the day, and it still is. And at Cornell, we're trying to keep it going as much as we can by getting people into growing oysters, into eating oysters, into buying local oysters. So thanks again, appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris, for sharing your amazing collection with us and giving us a bit of history, too. Now, we're here at the ultimate oyster destination in Greenport, Little Creek Oysters. We're going to talk to Ian in a minute and then maybe even enjoy an oyster or two.
My name is Ian Weil. This is Little Creek Oysters, and we have been part of Shellabration since I think even before we were open as customers. Well, we wandered around and did the full adult trick-or-treating for oysters and beverages. So of course when we opened, we wanted to be a part of it, and we've been really so honored to be sort of the start or finish or both for a lot of people. And we've had people come in all summer and fall asking what the story is for Shellabration this year, and we're right there with everybody, missing some of our regular traditions for this year, but making the best of it and inventing new ways to celebrate and celebrate. We're still here. We'll be here certainly through the end of the year anyway, and like in everything else in 2020, playing it by ear a little bit. I think one of the things that we've enjoyed most out of Shellabrations in the past is the ability to show off a little bit, maybe play a little bit, maybe make something that we don't usually do, or certainly you know, have a little bit of fun and introduce on our side. Well, one of the things we'd like to do is introduce a new oyster from maybe a new startup farm that doesn't have a lot of other you know, outlets yet. Maybe they're just getting started. Maybe they only have been able to harvest enough for just this one day, and we'll see them in a year and a half when they've matured a little bit. So that's sort of what I feel like is our place in the oyster world out here anyway, is to support some of the smaller farms that have, you know, some fewer resources, and introduce it to people, because we like to learn how they grow, what their methodology is, why they're growing, how did they even start in this crazy project. And so for us, that's been a big part of our past Shellabrations, and we'll have some fun things on our menu through the rest of this year as we figure out how to sit outside and make do. You can always pick up oysters to go from here, and we're going to start to make some, you know, at-home kits for some of our grilled oysters, and you can always pick up our mignonettes and things like that to do at home. We've taught enough people how to shuck your own oysters here, so during the first quarantine lockdown, everybody suddenly was buying oysters and really working on their home shucking projects. One of the best ways that people can support the aquaculture in this crazy time, and at all times, is to really participate and find oyster farm stands that are near you, and try and buy directly from the growers whenever possible. We're always happy to sell oysters to people to take home, of course, but if you want to, if you have a particular farm you like, you know, it's a way to get to know the grower and support them directly without any kind of middle person, which is, you know, has proven helpful in these quieter times. Yeah, and then we miss the big crowd and the check-in and the craziness and the fun and the cold, and everybody's, you know, trying to stay warm in those crazy days. You know, we think about that this is the first time we've ever had to eat outside in December, but it was every December. We've always ate, you know, we've always done shellfish outside in the middle of December and clustered around things over ice and cold beer, and people seem to be fine. I keep joking that I want to get one of those big thermometers, like from Agway or one of the things, take the numbers off, and just in the cold parts you just write closed, and in the warm parts write open, and you just, if you want to find out if we're open, just look at the thermometer, you know. But if it's not raining, you know, if people can sit outside, we'll be open. If you can't, We are trying to keep the retail side open so you can come in and pick up some oysters and other holiday type things, but otherwise we're sort of fair weather this time of year, I think. You know, for every hardship this year, there have been some incredible silver linings and some really important connections, and I think some strengthenings of fabric, both between different restaurants in this village, different restaurants on the fork, different oyster growers, other farmers. It really might be the shame that this is not an in-person Shellabration year of all years, because I think that this might be the year where everybody has cooperated the most and wanted to be part of a dynamic community the most. You know, we always are pretty good at it, but it required coordination to survive the summer, and it would be such a remarkable way to celebrate in person. You know, everybody's dying to have the party, right? Everybody is waiting to have the great finish party, and this is really should be the great wrap party, but we'll arrange it.
All right, everyone, that does it for our virtual Shellabration presentation. I think that all of us deserve a little oyster cheers right now. So cheers to everyone at home, and cheers with Ian and Rosalie. All right.